Good evening, everyone. I'm Laurie Norton Moffett, Director and CEO of Norman Rockwell Museum, and I could not be happier to welcome you all back to the reopened museum. Today was our first day of reopening the doors to our members and our closest friends, and on Sunday we opened to the public. And it is absolutely fitting that tonight we welcome Liza Donnelly, our featured artist this summer, and you'll hear about her by our Chief Curator and Deputy Director, Stephanie Plunkett, who has organized this summer's exhibitions with our curatorial team. We have missed you, and I have to say we thank you so very much for all you have done to sustain the museum these 4 months while we've been closed. Your support has helped us bring the virtual museum into people's homes, into classrooms, into families and individuals who have been home alone during these past months in this very new time that we're living in. So as we step back out into the world, slowly we invite you back to the museum. Everything has been prepared for you, and you'll find the museum very spacious and accommodating to all of the health guidelines needed in this current moment. So welcome back to Norman Rockwell Museum, and now it is my pleasure to introduce you to the museum's Deputy Director and Chief Curator, Stephanie Plunkett.
It has really been a pleasure to work with Liza Donnelly over these past couple of months. She has been gracious. We've had the pleasure of visiting her studio and talking with her about the themes in her work, the things that she cares the most about. And it's now my great pleasure to just tell you a little bit about her. And as you know, cartoons are a lot more than what they appear to be. They can help us open a dialogue, as Liza says, and they can help us think about things that are not always so easy to consider and to talk about. So I think you'll find that in Liza's work. To give you a little background, Liza Donnelly is, as you know, a prolific cartoonist, author, and visual journalist whose humorous drawings, inspired by real-world events, provide much-needed comic relief in uncertain times such as these. For Liza, hand-drawn lines are a means of launching political movements, or calling leaders into account, or questioning or thinking about the way we live, and also of finding common ground. As her work reveals, cartoons are a way of opening a dialogue, and they can inspire new ways of thinking about things. Liza will be discussing her art shortly, but just to let you know, she begins her day by checking major news outlets like CBS, CNN, NPR, and Twitter. And later, she creates and shares digital drawings inspired by the day's most pressing events. Her live digital reporting and cartoons have been featured in The New Yorker, where she has been a staff artist since 1979, on CBS News, NBC, and CNN, and in Forbes, Ms., The New York Times, Fusion, Medium, Narrative, Politico, The Daily Beast, Open Salon, The Huffington Post, and Women's E-News, just to name a few. She's the creator and editor of World Inc., which connects the world of cartoonists around the world, and she has spoken internationally and at the United Nations on behalf of Cartooning for Peace, an organization that defends fundamental freedoms and democracy. A self-described feminist, Liza is the author of Funny Ladies, The New Yorker's greatest women cartoonists and their cartoons, which chronicles the history of women in cartoons in the venerable publication. Cartoon Marriage, created with her husband and fellow cartoonist Michael Maslin, who is actually here with us this evening. He's waving behind me, in front of me. And Women on Men, a 2014 finalist for the Thurber Prize for American Humor, as well as many other books for adults. But in addition, Liza has created some really wonderful picture books for children, including Dinosaur Day, Dinosaur Garden, The End of the Rainbow, and A Hippo in Our Yard. And examples from those books can be seen here in the exhibition. It is a great pleasure to welcome Liza to the galleries, and we hope you have a wonderful time learning more about the artist from her directly. Welcome, Liza.
Thank you.
Camera's right there.
It's great to be here, and it's a real honor to be here. I want to thank Stephanie for doing a beautiful job with the framing and the arranging and the curating and the choosing, and it was a real pleasure to work with you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
I thoroughly enjoy this museum. I've worked with you before, doing some talks here about other issues of other cartoonists, and it's been great to be here through this process. And Lori Moffat, thank you so much for doing this. It's quite surreal and really a lot of fun. So, what are we doing now? Questions?
I think what we are going to do is we're going to invite you to start your gallery walk.
Okay.
And so it might be good to start with your youth, because that is where the story really began in terms of how you began to draw and think about what being a cartoonist could potentially mean.
Okay.
So shall we walk over
Sure.
and look at some of the originals?
So I started drawing when I was a little girl, about 7 years old. I was drawing as a child, like many children do, and I began to draw cartoons because my mother gave me a copy of a book of cartoons by James Thurber, and I started tracing Thurber because I knew she loved The New Yorker, and I wanted to make her happy, make her smile. So I started tracing his work, and it made her smile, and I was hooked. That's the beginning of my cartoon career. And I continued to do that for her, and as you can see here, I started doing more drawings. Like, these are really early, testing out expressions, and then drawing my friends in high school, here, and I drew for the yearbook and things like that. But you can see Thurber's influence here in this drawing, I think.
I think it's so much fun that you have these early works.
I know. I thank my mother for that. She saved everything. And in fact, when I was little drawing cartoons, she would clip out the spot drawings in the New Yorker for me and save them in an envelope, as if to say, see, you can do this.
And there's a wonderful photo of you and your mother right there in the case.
Oh yeah, my mother was very encouraging, and my father was as well. They both bought me paper and pencils, and I was such a shy child. They were worried about me, apparently, that I just didn't talk much. But the drawing was my way of communicating and my way to be alone without having to seem odd, So for all you shy kids out there, there is a life after shyness.
And there's a fascinating letter that you wrote to a favorite cartoonist there.
The other big influence early on was Charles Schulz, of course, Peanuts. I loved reading the Peanuts daily strip, and I believe that Charles Schulz commentary often was just about life, but it was often guised political commentary as well. So I didn't know at the time, but I think it really influenced me. So.
Well, I think it's so important what you've said about recognizing children who can communicate visually.
Mm-hmm.
That was very much how Norman Rockwell's childhood was.
Oh, really?
He loved to draw early,
Mm-hmm.
and he became popular in school because of his
exactly.
writing.
Yeah.
And
That's
I
great.
think if we recognize that in children
Yeah.
early, there are many ways to learn and many ways to communicate.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful clue to parents
Mm-hmm.
to be like your parents and encourage it.
I know. I think now many parents are more encouraging in the schools. Our daughters, when they were in school, they would have to do an essay, but they'd also be instructed to do a drawing with the essay. It's like, wow, we didn't have that when I was growing up. Yeah. And these are rejection slips from the New Yorker, which later on, I got many, many more of these.
Liza gave me a big envelope, and they had lots of letters in them, but I think the message is perseverance, right?
Right, yeah. I discovered the New Yorker, it was in our house, but when I was in college, I began to think, I wanted to do political cartoons when I was little, because I grew up during the Civil Rights era and Watergate and assassinations, and I wanted to figure out a way to help somehow. And since I was shy or quiet, I didn't want to go out and protest. I thought I'd do it that way. And a lot of influences in that regard. Her blog, Gary Trudeau, Ben Shahn, lots of people. But then I saw the New Yorker when I was in college. I looked at it more closely and I saw, well, their cartoons are political, some of them. And I thought, well, it's a quiet politics. It's a quiet way of going at politics, at least in my memory, but there were stronger ones earlier in the New Yorker's career, lifetime. I started submitting to the New Yorker, and because I thought this is where I want to be. So perseverance, yeah, you gotta keep at it, keep pushing at it. That's half the battle, really, is sticking to it.
What was it like to receive the first acceptance letter?
Oh God, well, it was shocking and thrilling at the same time. And I was at the magazine. I was already living in New York at that point. It was a couple of years out of college, and I was living in New York, working at a museum, and not like this. It was a natural history museum, but you drop your work off at the magazine weekly. You drop off 6 to 10 drawings, and you slip it through a window on the 20th floor in the vestibule, hand it to a woman through a window at a little slot in the window, and she hands you back your rejects from the week before. This one week I went in and I handed her my envelope and expected another envelope back, and she said, "Mr. Lorenz wants to see you." So I nearly fainted and went in. I was let into the inner sanctums of the New Yorker and went to see him, and he said, "We'd like to buy this cartoon."
And the cartoon you're talking about is right on that wall.
This one. And it's kind of an esoteric cartoon, which was, I was really happy to sell it, but it was like trying to explain this to people. I just came out of college, right? And in college I studied art. And one of the things I studied was art about Cézanne. I read essays by Cézanne. And he always talked about the 3 elements in nature that artists need to learn how to draw: the cone, the sphere, and the cylinder. And so I did the cone, the sphere, and the cylinder, and a TV set. So it's a typical flip of a given, you know, of a cliche. So.
And then the first published cartoon
Yeah.
is actually the one right underneath it.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So they bought this one, and then I don't think they bought another one until 6 months later, which is excruciating, but it's not uncommon. It wasn't uncommon at the time. And then they bought this one, which is a man walking down the street with, he's just walking down the street. He passes the dog and he says to himself, "Maybe I don't pet dogs enough." And then he returns and pets the dog, and then he walks on. So that's the first one they published, and then they ran that one subsequently. But they bought a lot of my sequential drawings at the time. They bought, because William Shawn loved captionless cartoons. I think he believed that they were his favorite, to put it that way. And so he bought a lot of those from me and from other people too. They're hard to sustain, they're hard to come up with, they're hard to think of, they're not easy to come up with. But anyway.
You know, the sketchbook is important to you, isn't it? So we had a lot of fun looking through your sketchbooks, and I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about the idea process and how you do.
Yeah. Here. So this is a typical sketchbook of mine, usually about that size. I do a lot of doodles and words, like buzzwords or words in the culture that are being, maybe this one over here, that are being tossed around in the culture, and you sit with the images and the words and try to imagine a cartoon. You try to, it's like almost, sometimes it's like happy accidents when the words and the imagery come together, but it's often a lot of work to try to place these things into a cartoon. And I have tons of these. This is an older one. It's a mysterious process.
In this case, actually, we were able to highlight also some of the work that you did. We're jumping ahead a little bit here, for Cartooning for Peace. Mm-hmm. So the photograph there features Kofi Annan, and I wonder if you'd like to give a little background on that, because as we walk through, people will see some of those drawings.
Right. So in 2005, there was an event in the news with Danish cartoon controversy. And it was, just briefly, an editor in Denmark commissioned to the artist that he knew to draw Muhammad. And so and some of them did, some of them didn't. And that ended up causing, when they published them after a while, it ended up causing a lot of turmoil in Europe, not here in this country, I don't think. A lot of riots and protests, particularly from extremist groups, against these cartoons. And at the time, Kofi Annan was the Secretary General, and he loved cartoons. Big fan of cartoons, and he wanted to have a day of cartoonists talking about their craft and about the importance of cartoons and the responsibility of cartoonists. And so he and his staff pulled together a group of cartoonists from all over the world, and one of those cartoonists is Jean Plantu, who's the primary cartoonist of Le Monde in Paris. And so Jean's there. It's hard to, where is he? I can't. Anyway, he's in that picture. And so Jean and Kofi Annan at that day, I guess, decided to create Cartooning for Peace, which is an organization of about 150 cartoonists around the globe who get together to talk about cartooning and its role in different cultures and in expanding dialogue and understanding each other across the world, because so many of these cartoonists in Europe draw captionless cartoons. They're just beautiful, and that's because they have to cross borders. So cartoons can go across borders and help people understand each other better.
So as we move around the gallery, one of the topics that you do address quite frequently is love and relationships. And it happens that Michael is here. I don't know. Michael wants to put his 2 cents in. But is there anything on that wall you might like to highlight, Liza?
Because everybody can relate to it. Cartoons are all about connecting with other people, and so what we have in common is relationships, love. So looking at these, this is one of the more popular ones that got reprinted many, many times. This was in the New Yorker, and it was, the New Yorker helps facilitate reprints in other publications, and also now online they'll share this and it'll get shared hundreds of times. And it's a woman saying to the man, "I'd invite you in, but my life's a mess." Well, this one I like because it's one of my favorites, an early cartoon from the 80s, I think, and it was in the New Yorker, and the woman saying, "It would take more than your pleats to drive us apart, but not much more."
Liza, I know that you have said that you never really thought of yourself necessarily as a feminist, but that voice did start to come out. And there are some images on the other side of the gallery. I wonder if you want to take a look.
Stephanie, I've always thought of myself as a feminist, but I didn't think I needed to draw about it when I began my career. I just thought, I'm a cartoonist, I'll draw about life. I didn't see it as an activist tool, really. Although I was doing political cartoons, I didn't think of that. And I wish I had, but I didn't. So these are for online. Not for the New Yorker, and this is a period when I started to do more cartoons about women's rights globally, and I realized that I could do that. I didn't used to think that I could draw about being a woman in another part of the world, because I'm not. I have to draw about what I know. And then I realized that unfortunately most women around the world share something in common, which is they've been either ridiculed or harassed or abused or raped or worse. So that's something that I can, or their rights restricted, as in driving. And this is another example of that. So yeah. So this is a period when I started to extend my cartoons in that direction, trying to push myself to be stronger opinion. So.
Politics has also become a topic of your cartoons as well. And some of them appear here, in fact, an early one.
Yeah, this is an early political cartoon. This is my first, I think this is the first political cartoon, and this was in the New Yorker. It's my second published cartoon in the New Yorker, and it's the man is opening his fortune cookie, and it's saying, "You will find love and happiness, and will vote for Fritz Mondale." And this was in 1984 when Walter Mondale was running for president, and many of us were like, I liked him, but many people, I could sense people were feeling like, okay, I'll vote for him. It just was not a lot of enthusiasm, sadly, for him, and he lost. So that was exciting to have that happen. And that's the typical New Yorker political cartoon at that time. And this is another one, woman saying that she said, he can't talk to you right now, he'll call you back. He's trying to get the Perot bumper sticker off his car. And that was when, thank you. That was, if you guys remember Perot, Ross Perot, he ran twice for president, if I recall. The second time, it got a little weird. I don't remember the details. A lot of people were backing away from him. And that's what that's about. These are more subtle feminist cartoons. This one, let's see, that's just talking about feminism. Some kids at school called you a feminist, Mom, but I punched them out. So the little girl, this was done in the 90s, the little girl thinks feminism is a bad word, which many people felt in that time period. And I don't advocate violence, but she's sort of embodying feminism in being strong and standing up for her mother. This is another one that is personal in a way, and it's trying to half the battle or less than half the battle really of overcoming boundaries for women is to make an inner have an inner dialogue saying I'm good enough, I should be there. And I think I've dealt with that. I know a lot of us deal with that. I know men do too. I think it's the imposter syndrome, like I'm not supposed to be here. And that's what that's about. There are a couple of cartoons about Hillary Clinton when she ran and different. This is just making fun of the things that were used against her and her clothing when she ran for president. These were published online, in a publication called The Nib.
And we're coming towards some of the work that you did do for Cartooning for Peace, and I wonder if you would want to, single a couple out and maybe read the captions if there are.
Can you get me my water, wherever that is? I think I left it over there somewhere. Yeah, so Cartooning for Peace, I described it already. And when I began to be a part of that group, I did do a lot of captionless stuff when I was younger, but doing political captionless is a challenge, and I learned a lot from my international friends. And I now know cartoonists around the world. It's just fascinating. Thanks. I just like trying to think of what one to talk about. I mean, this is one of my favorites, and it gets reprinted a lot. It's a woman teaching peace, and the idea is it's a vague idea, but the idea is that peace can be interpreted in many different ways, and that's okay in my mind. This one also, I love this one. Again, these were never published; they were just used by Cartooning for Peace, and I published them on my sites.
Do you want to read that caption?
Yeah, she says, "Mommy, can we watch the Peace Channel now?" I forget when that was done, probably in the 90s. A lot before people were on their phones so much. This one I also love, hot dog, soda, world peace. And that's a setting that I use a lot, those hot dog stands in New York. I love playing around with those. I've done a lot of cartoons about those. And this one I just mentioned briefly because it's important. In 2015, if you guys recall, there was the attack on the publication Charlie Hebdo in Paris, and the cartoonists and editors were murdered. And I don't remember the date of it, but it was a horrible day. Cartoonists from around the world converged on the internet with, talking to each other and sharing cartoons about our grief and our confusion and our worry about our craft and about the world. Those editors and cartoonists were killed, but a couple of people in a deli in Paris were killed as well, by two brothers, I believe. So this is my expression. This was the one, I did a couple of cartoons, but this is my favorite one, and it just talks about how I think that what I want to do with my pen is to promote peace, and that's pretty much my goal. After 9/11, are we going to get to that cartoon sometime?
Yes, actually it's right here.
Okay.
So that maybe is a good segue into
Okay.
into that drawing.
Keep me I don't know what the timing is. Just keep me, I don't know if I'm talking too much.
I think we're doing good.
Okay.
Yeah, we're doing good. I know you had said you weren't quite sure how you were going to be approaching cartooning following 9/11.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, so it connects with that in that after 9/11, when the towers came down and all those people were killed, I questioned, like so many other people, like what am I doing with my life? What is the point of all this? You really reevaluate. Many of us reevaluated our goals and our purposes, and I didn't know if I could be a cartoonist anymore, but it's in my interpretation of what we were all feeling in the United States at the time. This was a couple of months after the attack, and the New Yorker bought it and published it, and I felt like I was back on track. But at that time, I decided to do more political cartoons, just to try to do more political cartoons. And luckily, the internet was starting to pick up speed, and so I could publish. If the New Yorker didn't buy it, I could publish it online and other places as well.
Some of the work you're standing in front of here also deals with what I think you described as a kind of slice of life observations. And so I don't know if there's anything that you might want to pull out. There's the color drawing in the middle. I recall you produced at a time when Tina Brown was, wanting to have more color in the magazine. Yeah,
well, Tina Brown, when she became editor, I think one of her tasks she was given was to increase circulation. But one thing she did was brought photographs in, and she, I forget when this was published, but early in her career she asked, the cartoon was bought, and then I was asked to do it in color. And this issue was the first issue since, I don't know when, Michael, when was the first issue with color? I mean, the New Yorker never had color type. Sorry? 1926, they had one color cartoon in the New Yorker? Two. But that was basically it. They didn't really do color cartoons. And there's a famous quote from Harold Ross, which I hope I'm going to get right. He said, well, what's so funny about red? And he's right. So there's no real reason why this needs to be in color. It just is. But she wanted it in color. I said, well, of course. So that's interesting. Slice of life. Yeah, and this one was about the Iraq War. I didn't protest this war, but I'll try to protest the next one. And it's like, at the time, there were a lot of protests against the war, but there were so many, it became clear to me that some people were not protesting because they really felt passionately about being anti-war. They just were doing what they thought they were supposed to do. So that's what that is about. And it doesn't have anything to do with women, it just happens to be two women speaking. And which is something that I try to do now, because a woman can be every man. You can make the woman speaking, and I try to do that.
Yeah. So the exhibition is actually very contemporary because we were able to share some of the drawings you've been doing, both relating to the Black Lives Matter movement as well as the COVID pandemic. And so we have a grouping of them here, and I believe are these drawings that you did for live drawing at 5 p.m., Liza?
Yeah.
You might want to say a little bit about live drawing, because for those people who don't know, it would be great.
Go over here, Rich, I think. How to start? Okay, so many of you guys might know that I do a lot of live drawing, not just my cartoons, but I go out into the world, and I'm a visual journalist, so I draw what I see, and I do it for news outlets and publications on my iPad. So when the pandemic hit, I was home, and it was great to be home in my studio a lot. But I really still wanted to connect more. And people have told me over the years that, and I think this is probably true, that they love watching artists draw. I mean, I do too. It's kind of fascinating. So I know that people like to see the hand creating. So I'd done this years ago too. I'd take my phone over my hand and just draw and put it on social media, and people were mesmerized. So I decided to do that at the beginning of the pandemic, to start drawing live, and I would do it every day at 5. Give it a time frame, and it was live Instagram TV. And I started by drawing we don't have any COVID drawings, do we?
Yes, right next to you, that group right there.
Those are not live drawings, though, but that's okay. I did, what it started out as was just not a cartoon that, maybe it's like an illustration like Norman Rockwell, like I'm illustrating what's going on right now. And I would draw and have the phone, I have a device now, holds the phone, and draw and talk just like what I'm feeling, what I'm hearing in the news, what's going on, and I can see people's comments, and they talk to me and they talk to each other, and everybody's discussing what's going on. And so I would draw, like I'd do a drawing of the frontline healthcare workers, or the frontline subway workers, the delivery people, the cashiers. So just drawings of the people that I wanted to honor by doing a drawing about them, and that's the way I felt. And then we morphed into, or we suddenly were hit with the murder of George Floyd, and there was another one right before it, Ahmaud Arbery, and this was shocking, and so I began to draw about that issue, about the protests, about Black Lives Matter, what was going on there, and this was a drawing that I did about COVID, the pandemic, but also trying to get people to talk to each other, just sit and talk. That's what that was expressing. So, I have to stay apart, but we can still communicate. And this was just some signs that I saw from the news that I would see people using. And now I'm doing things, whatever's in the news, I'll draw about that. These are some coronavirus drawings that I did. This was actually, this is one I did immediately when the virus hit, and it was global. I knew it was global. And it was never published anywhere, but I just used it on social media.
Liza, the drawing on the bottom was interesting in the sense that you, I believe, started it to deal with the concept of fermenting or something that was popular.
No, you're right. That's
and
right.
then it became a kind of a COVID drawing.
Yeah, so this is the woman saying, or the man saying that his friend or partner, you fermented everything? So she's got a lot of jars of things here. And what that was, I did that before the pandemic, and I was aware in the news that young people particularly, and restaurants were fermenting. It was like a thing. It was like I do a lot of cartoons about trends. I did 2 risotto cartoons for the New Yorker. I did a radicchio cartoon. I've done a lot of food cartoons, but this was fermenting is a thing. So then they ran it during the pandemic, and people thought I did it for the pandemic. Similarly, this one was bought. I drew this like in 2000, and I submitted it to the New Yorker. They didn't buy it. I submitted it again. They didn't buy it. Kept submitting this one, because if you really think something's good, keep trying. And this is one I did a live drawing of the Statue of Liberty about COVID. She's wearing a mask and it says COVID rules. Not that COVID is great, but COVID has rules. So. And this one was done for the pandemic, for the New Yorker, and using a word that's being bantered around in the culture before the pandemic, but particularly during the pandemic. And she's saying to her friend, she was Zen 5 minutes ago. So this woman's going nuts.
And for those of you who are interested in learning more about Liza's live drawings, my colleague Rich Bradway, has done a beautiful sequence that shows some of the various subjects that Liza has been drawing about.
That I've been traveling around the world.
Do you want to say a little bit about your travels?
Yeah. Back in 6 years ago or so, I was given an iPad as a gift, and I started fooling around with it and drawing. I was watching the State of the Union address, which I always do. I kind of find it fascinating, but it can be boring. And I started drawing what I saw on the TV with this program called Paper, and sending it out immediately on Twitter. And the response was quite immediate and good, and a lot of people liked what I was doing. They're very bold drawings. They're not showing them right now, but I think we have a loop that'll show more of them. And so I just kept doing it on, that's a COVID free draw, a live draw from my 5 o'clock session. But anyway, the live drawing with my iPad was done mostly in the beginning from my television. And I would do the Oscars, the Grammys, the political events. And then I got to go to the Oscars. I got to go to the Academy. I've been there 5 years now, drawing not only the red carpet, the people on the red carpet, but behind the scenes. And that's what I like to do. I like to give everybody a view of what's happening, and from my perspective. And I think it's a new way to look at the news, a new way to talk about the news. I've been to the White House. I went to the inauguration, the DNC, and I'm hoping to continue to do that when we're all able to go back to normal.
That's great.
Yeah.
There is right behind you, if you want to just give a little glimpse of another side of your career, which are the children's picture books.
Yeah.
So maybe just give a little glimpse there, and we'll bring the chairs in.
So I did a series of children's books. I drew a book dummy, an idea for a book, and an agent took it around, and Scholastic liked the idea, but they wanted me to make it into dinosaurs. So I did. I was happy to do that. And it became a series of 7 books about a little boy and his dog companion, which I think is really Snoopy from Peanuts, is influenced by Snoopy, and their love of dinosaurs, or his love of dinosaurs. It was really fun to draw. Simple, easy to read books, and I wanted them to be without words. And this one is Dinosaur Halloween, and it's mostly wordless. Yeah. And all the dinosaurs, except the monster dinosaur, they're all based on real dinosaurs. I had to work with a scientist. The kids were so knowledgeable about dinosaurs that if I got it wrong, they would let them know. So we made them right.
Great. Okay. So one question that actually just came in, and first of all, thank you for that amazing tour. It was really wonderful to hear your
I love what you
observations.
did, Stephanie.
Well, we are fortunate to have worked with you, and I have to thank our great curatorial team, and Rich and Lori and Mary and everybody. But we had a wonderful question, which is, how do you come up with your captions? I think that's a mystery to people because they're so clever.
It's a mystery to us, actually.
Is it?
No,
Yeah.
I mean, there's some mystery to it. I'm looking at my husband, Michael, because he does the same
Michael
thing.
might want to come in and answer that one too. That would be fun.
Yeah, I think when I first started out, I was observing a lot of New Yorker cartoons as a student of the art form, understanding what works when and how and why. There's so many different kinds of New Yorker cartoons, as I know you know. There's some that and they all work in mysterious ways. I mean, you have a caption and an image, and they should work really well together. A cartoon, the good ones are not an illustrated joke. They're more like a really nice package of visuals that work seamlessly with the words. And different artists have different ways of speaking in their captions and the drawing works with the caption, and so coming up with those is really hard. I think I referenced it earlier. You just have to sit at your desk and draw buzzwords or sentences, and then doodle a little bit, and then think, well, would that be what would they say in a doctor's? Would they say that in a doctor's office, or how does the word niche work in a coffee shop, or risotto? Is that something that you need a hotline for? It's like you pair unusual things together sometimes.
Yeah. Michael, would you have a different response? Do you want to come sit here and just give a little background on what you would do?
Hi, everybody. Bright lights, big city. Yeah, I have a very different.
Really? Different way of working?
You don't know this?
After how many years?
Actually, we don't work together, so she wouldn't know it. But I just sit at my desk and run this paper. And I know people find this funny, but I just wait. Just look at the paper and I wait. And I recently learned, one of our colleagues passed away last week, Henry Martin, great cartoonist. He's 2 weeks shy of 95, still working, I think. Oh, he's retired officially, but he did. I learned just the other day that he did the same thing, that he would take a piece of paper and just sit there and look at it and wait for something to happen.
But I see you doodling a lot and drawing the things that you like to draw.
Well, that's part of it. I don't think there's no real system.
There's no system.
There's no system. It's just.
But waiting, you're right, that's true, waiting. Like,
Waiting.
You have to be patient with yourself.
So show up.
You don't think
and
of something
wait.
right, show up and wait.
Show up and wait. And something hopefully will happen.
So this might be a good question for the two of you also. And Liza, maybe you'd repeat the question because I don't have my mic. But the question is, could you talk a bit about your connection with other cartoonists and what your cartooning community is like and what it means to you?
So the question is, talk about other cartoonists and our cartoon community and what that's like. Well, it's a great community. I mean, we've talked about this a lot over the years. It's a small, relatively speaking, community, and when I began, it was a very welcoming community, and it still is. I think we used to go out to lunch. It was before I knew you, but we used to go out to lunch every week after we would submit our cartoons, and just hang out and not usually talk shop at all, not talk about what you've drawn that week, but just have fun with each other. And then we would sometimes go play pool, and sometimes we went on the Circle Line tour around Manhattan once, a boat tour, went to the Mets game once. So it's just you hanging out with your friends. We're like colleagues in a very strange and difficult business, and we share a love of the art form. Passion.
And we've gotten to know, until very recent times, we've gotten to know, I think, almost everybody. And the great thing was that when we arrived at the magazine, there were several generations still working, and we got to know them. People from the 20s, from the 1920s were still there, working. Whitney Darrow Jr. was there. Charles Adams was there.
I got to meet Bill Steig.
Bill Steig was there, yeah. So that whole crowd, that were some of them in the very first decade, were still working, and we got to at least say hello to them as kids. We weren't going to.
How inspiring.
Yeah, it was terrific, and I think that really it has and continues to inspire us. I think.
And now you inspire others, which is pretty exciting because one of the questions here is. This one came in from Barbara on Zoom. Her granddaughter is a budding cartoonist, and she wonders if you have any advice.
How old is the granddaughter? Just keep drawing. Encourage her to draw, and draw a lot. Because you really have to love to do it. You have to love to do it. You can't force it.
Yeah.
You can take classes now. I mean, if she wants. Then a lot of places have classes now.
And when you guys were coming up, there were no cartooning classes necessarily,
No.
right?
Not really. A few here, in New York there were a couple, but.
No. When I went to college, I became a printmaking major because it allowed me to do my cartoons on stones and etchings, but they weren't teaching me cartoons. They were just giving me time and materials really to do what I wanted to do, what I have done since. So no, there was no training. The training was looking at other people's work. That was the training. That's why coming here is great, or any show of cartoons, or any art really.
Yeah.
It's all stuff that comes into us, and we keep it in there.
Well, it has been wonderful to have you here this evening. I'm just wondering, how does it feel to see your art on the wall?
Oh, it's wonderful. And,
It's a lot of fun just
It's-
having the opportunity to talk with you about what direction we should take and what you felt was most important.
yes, it was a really interesting process and it was a nice time to do it too, because I was home so much. I was able to go through my work and find things for you.
So we did have another request come in just now, which is somebody is asking if you might just say a little bit more about the concept of cartooning for peace and how cartoons can actually help to foster the the notion of peace in the world?
That's a great question. Because the title does imply that we're doing something actively for peace, but I think it's more indirect than that, in that it's a way to get cartoonists to talk about their work and the difficulties in their particular countries. So it's just a communication among people. And I think if you have an understanding and communication among people, you're going to have more likely to have peace. You know, if you understand the humanity, that humanity's global, that we're all just people, right? We all have the same, like I discovered with women, that we all have similar struggles on different levels, of course, different degrees. And those are things that cartoons can teach you, that they show common humanity. They show, like, we're all falling in love, we're all cooking risotto, not all of us, but we're all cooking something, we're all like struggling with children, we're all being harassed. I'm not, but yeah, you understand what I mean. So that's what the Cartooning for Peace is about. And I know that Jean Plantu now does it strongly in France, and he takes cartoonists, French-speaking cartoonists, and goes into schools to talk about political issues through cartoons. He goes into prisons, they go into prisons to talk about cartoons and how cartoons can be a communication tool. So,
great,
yeah.
Thank you.
You're
and
welcome.
I have one last question, which I think is very apt. What does it mean to be part of a cartooning couple? Do you work together? Do you work separately? Do you share ideas? What happens?
We both were cartoonists when we met. We both were with the New Yorker. That's how we met. So we knew each other's work before we met each other.
The first cartoon of yours that I ever saw is the guy walking past the parking meter.
The dog.
At Parsons School of Design and exhibit. The first time I knew there was somebody named Donnelly. I didn't know if she was a she or a he or what you were.
There weren't many of us.
But that was the first cartoon.
Yeah.
We have worked together. We did a thing for a book we did called Cartoon Marriage. And we worked together right across the kitchen table, and we put together these little graphic pieces about being married. Mm-hmm. And that was probably the most
collaborative
intense
thing we did. Yeah.
most something that we ever did together. But we've had a rule ever since we've met, and we do not show each other our work before we send it in. And actually, even after we send it in. I haven't seen most of your work.
And I haven't seen most of your work
right.
either. I mean, we have a lot of work. If you can imagine 6 to 8 cartoons a week, that's a lot of stuff that never sees the light of day.
Yeah. And there's a reason why we don't do that, and you want to explain what that is?
Sure. You know, your batch of cartoons weeklies are really, they're your babies, and they're important to you. And if you feel really strongly about 1 or 6 of them, and you show it to your cartooning spouse, and they don't respond the way you think they should have responded, it ruins your day, and it ruins the cartoon, and you think, I don't, you know, you're very protective.
It bursts the bubble.
Yeah.
Yeah. We like to live in bubbles.
That works pretty well sometimes.
Yes.
Well,
we thank you so much.
Thank
for
you
this
very much.
opportunity.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Liza, what an absolute treasure you are.
Thank
and
you.
Michael, thank you so much for joining the conversation.
Thank you
You're
for
an
having me.
incredible artist.
he's been a real great support for me over the years. Really. There were times when I wanted to quit cartooning, and he just guided me back. Because it's a hard business. Mm-hmm. Anyway, thank you.
Well, we thank you all for joining us. We are so happy you were here, and please come and see Liza Donnelly Comic Relief at the Norman Rockwell Museum whenever you can.
Great.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.